In the year 1970, the capital of Japan was in ruins. Several flustered magicians were hurriedly chanting spells and firing it towards something. Their attacks landed and caused a massive explosion. And from within it emerged the reason of their fear and horror. Seeing the unscathed monster, they felt deep terror in their hearts. But it was just the start of hell for them, as there emerged hundreds of monsters. The leading monster attacked them with his sharp claws, emitting terrifying amount of heat. The humans knew that this was their last day in this world. The attack landed and dust settled. But what these miserable magicians thought didn't occur. As they slowly opened their eyes, they saw a person in black outfit who had single-handedly dissipated the fire attack. Seeing him, some magicians had confused expressions, while some had excited expressions, but the most common one was that of relief. The man turned and said with a smile, "You have done well." The magicians cried hearing those heartfelt words. The man then ordered everyone to retreat and leave everything to him. All the magicians hurriedly retreated. While they were retreating, one of the ignorant magicians asked, "Was it really okay to leave everything to that man? Could he really stop them?" Hearing all this, the other magician told him to shut up, as he was not aware of the greatness of that man. He was the founder of magic, as well as the strongest mage alive. The ignorant magician stuttered and asked, "Was he the famous mage Ikikami?" The other magician wiped his tears of relief, thinking about the man standing in front, as well as the greatest hope of humanity. The man Ikikami stood amidst all the monsters. The monster once again attacked the man, thinking him as one of those weaklings from earlier. But the man dodged the attack smoothly and countered with its own powerful move, eliminating the monster completely. The man then smirked and taunted the other monsters. The battle continued. In order to understand all this, let's go to the past. One day, all across the world, a large number of monsters suddenly began to appear. This event came to be known as the calamity. Humanity's weapons were entirely ineffective against the monsters. Humanity, however, began opening their eyes to the possibilities of magic. Magic soon became the one and only thing capable of defeating monsters. The battle between monsters and humans continued for over a decade. Back to the present. A man stood in the middle of the flames. This was the most powerful mage. There was nobody but him who could save the world. All of a sudden, the man sensed terrifying amount of demonic energy, and when he saw the thing in front of him, he realized that this was the demon god, the top-ranked boss monster, the boss of calamity. The magic power and pressure it emitted was not something a normal magician could handle. The man thought, even though the demon god was injured, it could still emit such horrifying powers. The demon god suddenly launched another massive fire-based attack. The man dodged it and thought, the demon god was in a hurry to finish this battle as it was injured, so it used its highest level magic, the 14th level, to end this. This time the demon god not only cast the 14th level spell, but also another spell called the 6th element compound magic. The man then combined a wooden and earth-based spell, and created a wall to stop the incoming attack. The attack landed, and it took a lot of energy from the man just to stop it. An explosion occurred and massive shock waves were sent around the area. Then man was lightly injured as he landed on the ground. The man saw the demon god charging his mana once more for another massive attack. The man realized that he could not win at this rate. He sighed and then realized he had no choice but to use it. The man started overflowing with mana. He was going to use his strongest attack. The power of magic was determined by its rank. And the number of magic circles was what determined a magic's rank. The highest rank a demon god could achieve was the 14th rank. But the man's limit was 15th rank. He completed his spell, the 15th rank Innocent Void. The attack landed, and with it the area around it disappeared along with the demon god. The world welcomed a new future, as the last of demon god's existence slowly faded away. But no victory ever comes without a price. The man fell down from the sky, and as his consciousness was fading away, he thought he had defeated the demon god, but he had used up all of his magic. Well, dying as a great sage was not a bad way to go out. He had a satisfied smile on his face. And thus, the greatest mage of humanity slowly closed his eyes. After the man died, a ball of shining yellow light floated out of his body. This was his soul. The soul traveled and traveled. It broke the space-time barrier and entered into a modern building, inside the body of a boy who was bandaged all over. Soon, the soul completely emerged within the boy's body. The boy slowly moved his fingers, and then suddenly got up. He realized that he was alive, but how was it possible even after using all of his magic? Only then did he notice his surroundings. They were weird, but what shocked him the most was the face in front of him. At this moment, as the boy was still in shock, the door opened and the nurse along with the doctor entered. The nurse then said, "Kusanagi-san, we would like to do some checkups." After a while, the doctor slowly removed the bandages from the body of the boy. The doctor had shock all over his face. He still couldn't believe it. The boy had lost consciousness and went to a critical condition due to the traffic accident, but now after a night he was already completely healed. It was like he was healed by holy magic. The boy then thought that was because his body automatically heals him with holy magic. He was confused by the term traffic accident. He then asked the doctor, was his magic power depleted? The doctor asked in confusion, magic power? What did he mean? The boy then continued, during the calamity he was fighting monsters and depleted his magic power. The doctor then asked the boy to tell his name and current year. The boy replied, I am Ikikami Minato, and this should be year 1970. The doctor, hearing that answer, mumbled, could it be memory impairment? The boy was confused seeing the doctor's reaction. The doctor then said, your name is Kusanagi Minato, and this year is 2022. The boy was shocked hearing this. He then looked at their serious reactions and realized that they were not lying. He was surprised to see such thin and clean image in a television. Even the calendar showed the year 2022. He looked at the nurse who was using her tablet and thought, what was that weird thing in her hand? Was this really the future? At this moment the doctor spoke. The calamity you mentioned occurred 50 years ago and hasn't appeared since. The boy was once again surprised and asked then, what about the monsters? The doctor continued, there are monsters, but their numbers aren't many. Nowadays the world is very peaceful. Hearing all this, the boy sighed with relief and thought, thank goodness, the world is finally at peace. The doctor told the boy, in the great war against the demon god, Ikikami Minato died. He sacrificed himself to save the world. Therefore he was not Ikikami Minato. The boy then thought, so after he died, his soul traveled through space and time and got into the body of Kusanagi Minato. But why did this happen? A few weeks later, in an old apartment, a boy entered the room. This boy was Kusanagi. He was discharged from the hospital and reached the house of the previous body's owner. He looked at the information he received from the hospital. The boy Kusanagi's parents had passed away when he was a child. He was kicked out by his foster parents and sent to a boarding school. Since then, he had been getting by with his parents' remaining inheritance. The boy then thought, there was no such thing as reincarnation magic, so was his reincarnation the work of God? Or was it all by chance? He looked at the ID card and saw that it was of a magic academy. He thought back in his day, there was no such academy, as there was no reason for it to exist. The magicians were busy in the war against demons and had no time to teach people. The boy smiled as this academy was going to be an interesting experience. All of a sudden, his phone rang. He saw the name displayed to be Tadano-kun. He was confused as how to use the phone. So, he threw it away. The phone stopped ringing and a message arrived from the boy named Tadano, but the content of it didn't look friendly. The next morning, Kamui Magic Academy's entrance was busy. Students were entering the school, while some in groups were chatting. For Kusanagi, this was all a first time. He was excited because going to school as an adult for the first time made his heart pumping. But there was something which made him frown. A boy proudly practiced his fire spell on a dummy. Seeing this, Kusanagi was shocked and thought, was this even a spell? It was more like a candle flame. How could it be so disappointing? Compared to a newbie magician from his time, it was like a tenth of that power. Could these children even succeed as magicians? He then sighed and started walking. As he walked, he thought, it was all because the world was drunk on peace. That was the only reason for magic to decline this much. After he entered his class, he took a seat and was excited to experience something new. He was anticipating if the previous body's owner had any friends here. At this moment, a rude shout was heard. "Hey you Kusanagi, how dare you ignore my message?" Kusanagi turned around and asked the boy who he was. Hearing this, the boy became angry and directly kicked him. Kusanagi dodged the kick, and it landed on a table, making it fly. The boy shouted, "How dare you forget me, Tadano-kun?" Suddenly Kusanagi smiled and said, now he remembered, so he was a friend of his. Tadano scoffed and said, so he finally remembered him. He should know what being a friend means. Kusanagi shook his hands and said, "Yeah, let's get along." The boy took away his hand in anger and said, "It was not that." He then grabbed his collar and ordered him to hand over some money, as he had plenty left from his parents' inheritance. The smile on his face vanished as he slowly said, "I get it now, so Kusanagi Minato was being bullied." Tadano got angry hearing all this and raised his fist to punch him. But at this time the door opened and a lovely voice greeted everyone, "Good morning." A beautiful blue-haired girl entered the class. Seeing this girl, Tadano blushed as she was his crush. He then whispered to Kusanagi not to forget the money. After saying all that, he left. After a while, the class had started and the instructor was explaining about the great calamity. He continued his lesson talking about how the monsters appeared all over the world and caused destruction everywhere. But at that time, when humanity despaired, the pioneer of magic Ikikami Minato, also known as the Great Sage, stood as a barrier protecting humanity. He didn't get defeated by any of the monsters and directly confronted the demon god himself. He sacrificed himself for the sake of humanity. Since then, the calamity has never returned. The teacher was full of praises for Ikikami Minato. He then asked the class, "So, students, tell me who exactly was Ikikami Minato?" The blue-haired girl hurriedly raised her hand to answer it. After getting the instructor's approval, she answered, "The only survivor of the first calamity and the first magician, and he was also the reason that Kamui Magic Academy was built. He was the hero of the world and the idol of every magician. Ikikami Minato was a legendary magician who appeared once every 1,000 years." The teacher then nodded and said, "Correct, he was the only survivor of the first calamity and the first human to use magic. This magic academy was created to turn out many more magicians like Ikikami Minato. He was the greatest magician of all mankind." These all things would be in test, so all the students should note it down. Kusanagi, on the other hand, was trembling with a red face. In his mind, he was begging everyone to stop, as this was just too much. He felt so much embarrassment during the class as everyone hailed him with praises. He never expected to be embarrassed like this. Maybe coming to school was a bad idea. He then looked outside and thought, the world was at peace as no calamity occurred after his death. Maybe that was the reason the magicians had turned weak. But he really liked this peacefulness. The class ended and the teacher left. But before leaving, he informed everyone about the magic power assessment that would be conducted tomorrow. As the teacher left, Tadano came near Kusanagi's desk and smirked. He provoked him, saying, that was he ready to embarrass himself tomorrow, and show the world how puny his magic power is. Kusanagi was getting annoyed by this red-haired boy and thought there was no point in staying here. He got up, packed his bag, and started leaving. Being ignored like that made Tadano frown, and he then once again provoked him by saying, "Your parents too didn't have magic power, so it was understandable. An apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Sorry bro, I forgot," after saying that he and his friends started laughing. Kusanagi turned around and calmly replied, "You really are an arrogant, mindless idiot." Hearing those words, veins popped on the boy's face as his eyes were filled with rage. He shouted, "So you wanted to die, Kusanagi? I will fulfill that wish for you." After saying that, he charged his magic power to maximum and chanted a fire spell. The surrounding students were horrified and cried to stop, as using such high-tier magic in class was prohibited. Tadano ignored all the yelling and directly shot the fire attack towards Kusanagi. Seeing all this, the blue-haired girl Mizuha hurriedly went to stop this, but the attack had already reached Kusanagi. A huge explosion occurred. Each and every student stepped back from the unexpected explosion. The girl Mizuha shouted that no one should use magic over a meager squabble, as someone could get seriously hurt. Tadano, who had a massive ego, replied, "That loser was trying to pick a fight with me. It was not my fault." Soon the dust settled, and what everyone was afraid of didn't happen. A boy emerged from within the explosion, completely unscathed. Seeing him like that, every student was shocked. Kusanagi then calmly said, "That was unexpected." Tadano's friends were shocked too and mumbled how he was unscathed after taking on the attack head-on. Kusanagi, on the other hand, thought, if it was level 1 magic, then he could defend it with his magical barrier. He didn't need to use magic actively. All of a sudden, Kusanagi's voice became cold. He then said, "I tolerated thinking you are a child, but you need to be punished." After he finished his sentence, the atmosphere turned to an eerie one. Kusanagi started releasing his mana. The mana was so massive that it suffocated everyone near him. They realized that they couldn't move. Mizuha also couldn't move, but she was more concerned about this type of magic, as this was the first time she had ever seen it. As he slowly walked towards Tadano, his mana kept on increasing. Tadano trembled seeing him come towards him. The boy then moved his hand towards Tadano, who was on the verge of collapsing due to fear. At this moment, the gate opened, and the teacher came hurriedly. He asked what was that sound earlier. Was someone using magic in the class? Seeing the teacher, Kusanagi stopped. He then sighed and suddenly smiled. He said, "Nothing happened in the classroom. Maybe the sound he heard came from outside." The teacher didn't come inside the class. As Kusanagi came outside, he explained that there might be some students who were using magic outside. Even the smoke came from the outside, through their window. The teacher then smiled and said, "If it is you who is saying, then this must be true." The teacher then shouted to everyone in the class to get back to their seats. Kusanagi thought as he bade farewell to the teacher, he would create false evidence to close this case. Mizuha was taken aback by all this. On the other hand, Tadano gritted his teeth and walked away. Kusanagi thought as he looked at the retreating Tadano. Even though they were students, their magic level was too low. This level of magic couldn't even scratch a monster. Even if there was no calamity, there might be monsters outside. I should go and check it out. It was nighttime. In the city of Old Shibuya, a boy was seen jumping in the air using his magic. He then softly landed on a building. This boy was wearing a hood and had a mask covering his face. This boy was Kusanagi. He looked towards the city and thought, this place had changed a lot. He then used magic on his feet and once again started moving. He didn't sense any monsters around. Everything was in ruins, but it looked like the police took care of the remaining monsters. But as he was about to leave, he sensed the presence of some monsters and a human. He hurriedly moved towards the place. On the other side, a woman was trembling, looking at the terrifying monster in front of her. The monsters roared and attacked the woman. At this moment, before the attack even reached her, a boy landed in front of her. The attack didn't stop, instead continued towards the boy. Kusanagi used Earth's spell, and several spikes came out of the ground and pierced the monsters. After a while, all the monsters lay there dead. The boy then looked towards the woman who had stopped trembling. The woman was astonished to see all this. Kusanagi then thought, so this woman was a police magician after seeing the badge on her uniform. He then told her to be careful next time. The police magician wanted to thank this mysterious savior, but he had already disappeared. The woman then began thinking, who could this person be? Seeing the power, it looked like he might be at the level of a great magician, but the person didn't chant any spells. How is this possible? On the other side, Kusanagi thought it was right to keep his face hidden. As he had just reincarnated, he didn't want to stand out. But now that he thought about it, how could the police magician be this weak? Was she really going to get killed by such a low-level monster? Even the police's magic levels had gone down a lot. It looked like, in this time and age, if a calamity were to occur, the whole world would be annihilated. It was not just the students but police as well. They couldn't defeat weak monsters, and if a strong monster were to appear, he couldn't even imagine the damage it would do. Suddenly, Kusanagi smiled and said, looks like even in this time period, they need my powers. After that, the night was busy, as a boy took care of all the monsters in the neighborhood. The next day, the teacher explained that today, they would be measuring the magic power of all the students. He said that not only would the device measure their magic amount, but also their attribute. These were the most important things to consider if one planned to become a professional magician. Once again, Kusanagi was astonished and thought, so, even people couldn't measure their magic power without using that thing. Not only the students, but even the teachers didn't know about something as basic as magic perception. It was something that every magician had, and using that one could sense their power and their attribute. As he was thinking, he heard a voice. Would now be a good time to talk. He looked towards the source of the voice. It was the girl Mizuha. Seeing her talk with Kusanagi, all the students in the class whispered among themselves. To be called out by the goddess, what a luck this guy had. Oh my God, the loser is talking to the most beautiful girl in class. Mizuha started the conversation. This is the first time we have spoken to each other. I am the second daughter from the magic noble house of Mizuha, Mizuha Uika. Kusanagi had a confused expression, as this was the first time he had heard the term, magic noble. The girl was shocked hearing this and asked, so he wasn't even aware about something like this. She then explained, we are from the leading 4 noble houses, the head of magicians. The boy thought back then nothing like that existed, and he had never heard of this Mizuha family. He then looked at her and thought, her magic power was not great. For a family of prominent magicians, their power sure was lackluster. Mizuha, on the other hand, was annoyed to see the boy remain silent. She thought, even though she generously started a conversation with him, he remained indifferent. Tadano was getting angrier each passing minute because of jealousy, seeing Mizuha converse with Kusanagi. Kusanagi then asked the girl, so what business did the magic nobility have with him? Mizuha got irritated hearing the tone in which he talked. She had never experienced someone being so casual with her. She calmed her anger by taking deep breaths. Kusanagi thought this girl was a noble woman but was really strange. Mizuha thought when Kusanagi was hit by the magic yesterday, he came out unscathed. There must be a reason for that. She then asked about yesterday, but she couldn't complete her sentence as the teacher's voice was heard. Everyone get ready, we will now start the assessment. Kusanagi ignored her with a cheerful smile and joined the other students. The girl then smirked and thought, it didn't matter as she would know his true power through this assessment. First was the narcissistic boy, Tadano. He then took out his magic flame and put his hand on the machine. The machine measured his power and the results were displayed. The teacher announced the results. Tadano-jun, magic power 1000, attribute is fire. Kusanagi was thinking, seeing all this, if that was 1000, then the measuring standard hadn't changed over the past 50 years. The teacher then called out, "Next, Mizuha." The blue-haired girl walked out and touched the device. The teacher announced with a surprised voice, "Mizuha magic power 2000, attribute is water." Everyone was full of praises hearing that. The teacher then looked towards Tadano and Mizuha and said, "You two, your magic powers are at the top of this year's level. Both of you will become fantastic magicians." The students were excited and cheered for both of them. Seeing all this, Kusanagi had a weird expression and thought, was this some kind of joke? She was at the top with just 2000 magic power. She was not much better than an amateur magician. Mizuha, on the other hand, had a proud look on her face and smiled towards Kusanagi in a provoking manner. She thought, "How's is Kusanagi-kan? This is the true powerhouse of Mizuha." Kusanagi, seeing her looking towards him with a proud face, got a nauseating feeling. At this moment the teacher called out, "Next is Kusanagi Minato." As Kusanagi moved out, the murmurs started. The students discussed among themselves, he was ranked at the bottom last year. He was only impressive at studying, but his talent in magic was zero. Tadano smiled and thought, "Go embarrass yourself in front of Mizuha, you talentless loser." Mizuha, on the other hand, thought, "Now show me your true power, Kusanagi-kan. Well, whatever the result may be, it couldn't beat mine anyways." As Kusanagi stood in front of the device, he thought, what could he do? Back in the day, he stood out too much, and that was a pain. Should he hold back a bit? But then he denied it and put his hand on the device. He wanted to check, how much could this device really measure? Could this machine really measure the power of the great sage? As the mana entered, the machine continued to shine. But Kusanagi didn't stop and continued pouring out his mana. The spectacle happening in front of all students was unbelievable. The magic power loaded in the device was so high that, far away inside a class, a girl sensed it. A boy who was sleeping leisurely woke up from it. Mizuha, on the other hand, was shocked seeing this phenomenon. The magic measuring device's meter started to go berserk, and the whole device started shaking heavily. The academy was covered with magic, as it leaked from the machine, and finally the device couldn't handle it and exploded. The explosion was so fierce that the shockwaves sent some students flying. Even there were flying shards of the device that flew towards the students. Kusanagi destroyed them with his magic. He then stood there with a disappointed expression, as he had only exerted just 5% of his power, and the device couldn't handle it. But the good thing here was that no one could sense his magic power. He sighed and looked at the miserable state of his classmates and thought, were these guys really capable of becoming magicians? The teacher came hurriedly and asked if anyone was injured. The students replied that they were fine. The teacher then went towards the boy who was nearest to the explosion. He asked Kusanagi if he was fine. The boy replied that he was okay. The teacher sighed in relief. As Kusanagi was in the middle of the explosion, it was sheer luck that he was alive. The teacher then said, it was the first time he had seen a device explode like that. Kusanagi asked if it was a defective one, but the teacher said it wasn't, as it had been used for many years. He then continued, "But Kusanagi, we couldn't measure your magic power and attribute." Kusanagi asked if it was bad. The teacher replied, "We split students into groups for combat class. We were going to decide on groups after seeing your results, but all this happened." The teacher then called out Tadano and asked him if he could take Kusanagi into their group. Hearing that, Tadano smiled and said, "Of course, sir." After the teacher left, Tadano's smile turned vicious, and he lightly whispered in Kusanagi's ear, "I am looking forward to it." That's all for this video, and I hope you liked it. Tell me the truth. Did you also find Mizuha, the blue-haired girl, annoying? Share your thoughts in the comments.